Stepping through the doorway, I had to hold a hand up to cover my eyes. The sun was incredibly bright, and there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. This had given me the sad delusion that there would be some semblance of warmth to be had, but the bitter cold air shattered that happy thought. I wrapped my coat tighter around me, doing the top button up, which I always hated to do. It brought on feelings of claustrophobia, probably linked to the fact that it constricted my neck ever so slightly. My shoes hit the tarmac and I began to walk out into the playground, a line of excitable children following me out before dispersing amongst the play equipment. Some sat in small groups on the circular benches, talking loudly about the political changes within the class. A smile crept over my face. Who knew that 11-year-olds could discuss things in such a way? Other classes were emerging now, and a few more teachers came out to help keep watch. Jenny caught my eye and smiled, and I gave a small nod in reply. Soon the playground was swarmed with children, running around, playing games, excitedly discussing television shows and which video games they were playing. Plenty of them felt the need to come and share this information with me, and I of course went along with this, laughing and smiling. Although it could be the cause of a few accidents, the playground in a primary school often felt like one of the happiest places to be. I was content, but obviously alert to any potential dangers. Then I noticed her. There was a small girl, younger than the age I taught, maybe 6 or 7 years old from her build, and she was slumped in a corner next to a fence, hugging her knees to her chest. She wasn't wearing a coat, nor was she wearing the school jumper with our logo emblazoned on the front. She was sat on concrete, huddled in shadow, her dark hair cascading over her face as she looked down. God, she must have been freezing. I assumed she'd had some sort of argument with a friend and was staying away from the others, either sulking or genuinely upset. Either way, I felt the need to console her and definitely to send her back inside to get her coat. I walked over and squatted down next to her, getting to the same level to make sure that she didn't feel at all threatened. "Hey there, are you okay?" She shook her head, shaking some hair loose from her shoulders so that it covered even more of her face. "What happened?" Silence. It was at this point that I began to feel uncomfortable. I have no idea why. I'd had conversations just like these a dozen other times. Some children felt like talking, some needed consoling, some just needed space, and we obviously gave them that. They usually spoke when they were ready. But this situation though, something about it had me on edge to the point where I could actually feel the adrenaline kick of a flight or fight response. "Aren't you cold?" Another shaking of the head, and then a meek voice came forth from the mass of her hair. "I never get cold." Some of us never grew out of that bravado, but children almost always responded in this way. They were never too cold or too tired or anything else that could be perceived as weakness. At least, not when you asked them. "Well, I think we need to get you inside to get your coat, or at least your jumper." No. The voice was no longer meek. It was commanding, and her head shifted slightly so that it was raised more towards me, revealing her face. I tried my best not to, but I recoiled slightly. In this light, in the shadow of the fence, her eyes appeared entirely black. No iris, no sclera, just pure black ovals reflecting my own face. She sighed gently and her eyes closed again. "I want to play." "Well," I began, slowing my breathing and keeping the momentary fear out of my voice as best as I could. "You can play after we get your jumper." "Will you play with me?" "Sure." She tilted her head back now, the rest of the hair falling away as her eyes snapped open again suddenly. Again, those eyes. The pure black pools reflecting my own concerned face. "We have to play. You have to play with me." I'd stood up and taken a few steps back. She was shaking now, but she didn't seem to be shivering. There was no fear in her face, nothing that suggested she was cold anymore. It literally looked like she was shaking in anger, in pure rage. Her blank, expressionless face had contorted into one of anger, her eyes narrowing and her lips pulling back until her teeth were bared. I'd stumbled back a few more steps to put some space between us, but then I'd frozen. I felt simultaneously terrified and entirely embarrassed. Here I was, a senior teacher in a playground full of children and other staff, and I was retreating in horror from one infant. I opened my mouth to speak, and then the bell went, the ringing which symbolised the end of playtime. The anger vanished from her face, and her eyes closed again as children rushed around me, between us, none of them even stopping to register her as she rose from the ground. I found my feet and walked towards where my own class were now lining up. My eyes locked on her as she stood upright, and once more I was shown the darkness behind her eyelids as they opened. Her lips pulled up into a smile that chilled me more than anything I had counted in my entire teaching career. And then, lost in the throng of running children, I lost sight of her. Once she was out of my sight, it was easy to dismiss that what I had seen had just been a trick of the light. My own senses confused, causing me to become afraid, which then in turn caused me to be let down once again by my senses. I never saw that child again. I never noticed her so I could confirm or disprove what I had seen. And not long after this I changed schools, transferring somewhere closer to home. I had begun to put it out of my mind, dismiss it entirely. Then I stumbled upon a newspaper article, one which spoke of a black-eyed girl who had been frequently seen in Staffordshire. Looking into it, I found hundreds of reports, thousands of accounts of those who had witnessed the black-eyed children, all describing the same sense of fear, dread and foreboding which had accompanied sighting them, and the anger that the children displayed when it was discovered that they were anything but normal. Apparently most of these involve these black-eyed children asking to come into your home, saying that they need help to use your phone or to use the bathroom, or they come up to your car begging for a ride. I have no idea what happens if you allow them in, and the teacher and me would find it very difficult to turn them away and say no. All I would say is this: make sure you look them in the eye before saying yes.